in the wake of these attacks in Paris, for which ISIS has been blamed and taken responsibility, we have a new report about radical terror around the world. And it is not ISIS, but rather Nigeria's Boko Haram that is the world's deadliest extremist group, edging out ISIS. And of course, Boko Haram has pledged allegiance to ISIS, but operationally still a separate group. This is according to the Global Terrorism Index, which says that deaths attributed to Boko Haram have increased over 300% in 2014 to 6,600, compared to 6,000 blamed on the Islamic State. The two groups together, Boko Haram and ISIS, are responsible for 51% of terror deaths worldwide, according to publishing by the New York City-based Institute for Economics and Peace. And Amnesty International has blamed Nigeria's military for the deaths in detention of another 8,000 civilians. As we've reported, Boko Haram, very active during 2014, early 2015, believed to have been wiped out in northeastern Nigeria in 2009. Clearly, that was not the case, growing back with a vengeance. And even recently, 2 days ago, New York Times story reporting that a blast in the northeastern Nigerian city of Yola tore through a marketplace, killing 32 people, wounding 80 others, and officials do suspect that the Islamic militant group Boko Haram is to blame. People have been writing to me, Lewis, saying, Boko Haram is the same as ISIS. No, Boko Haram has pledged allegiance to ISIS ideologically, and of course both are Islamic radical groups, but for all practical purposes, Boko Haram is a separate group. And we talked about this on the bonus show yesterday, right? Why do some violent tragedies, violent acts get disproportionately more media attention than others? We were covering Boko Haram monthly, and we would have covered them even more if we had more source material to work with. So think about that. We did about a dozen stories on Boko Haram during this period starting in 2014 with the capture of the Nigerian schoolgirls. We were limited in terms of what we could do because there was actually not that much corporate media coverage of what was going on to begin with.
Yeah, well, certainly ISIS kind of took the focus off of Boko Haram. And things happening in other parts of the world have taken the focus off of it. Still, yes, even when Boko Haram was making headlines, there was not nearly enough coverage of Boko Haram. And they've been around for quite a while. And the number of incredible atrocities it's staggering, Dave. I mean, they're butchers.
And when you read comments online on internet forums and news websites, the reaction from many people about why we hear more about ISIS in Paris, for example, than about Boko Haram killing 200 people in Nigeria is, hey, they're not killing white people yet. We don't hear as much about terror or violence when it is non-white people that are being killed. But general violence in Africa, I don't know that, let me put it a different way. I don't know that that's all there is to it, Lewis. I think there are other reasons here as well. All of these radical Islamist groups are similar in important ways, right? Boko Haram, ISIS, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah. Sometimes the difference between them is whether they want a state, right? A caliphate, the Islamic State that they are seeking. I also don't think that's the only reason why we see differing levels of media coverage. There's sort of some intangible there that corporate media clearly is able to grasp onto with regard to whether we're going to get the wall-to-wall coverage that we got in Paris or whether we're not.
Well, we also have a situation where the actual reporters, cameras, photographers, and people on the ground are focusing on the Middle East. That's where they are. That's where they're physically collecting information. And if you are in Africa, they just don't have the presence in Africa. And so perhaps it's just harder to get information. And there are also some, strange connections between Boko Haram and state governments.
Yes, indeed.
Things are maybe a little more hush-hush over there.
This goes back to something I learned in a freshman media analysis communication class at UMass, which is, why do we get news from the Pentagon every day There's not actually headlines from the Pentagon every day. Well, it's because corporate media has decided we're going to have someone at the Pentagon every day, and it's super easy to just cut to them and we get something from them. It's a lot more work to be elsewhere, and clearly these towns in Nigeria are some of those places.
I mean, think about all the atrocities happening in North Korea right now. We'll never hear about any of that, though, because
No
there's
access.
no media.
Let's take a break. Send me your thoughts on this. Why do we hear about some stories and not others? I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. Lewis is on Twitter at @LewisMotamedy.